Hello and welcome to Lockdown UK. You're watching Core Finance. I am Charlie Gibson. Now, as you know, we are living in unprecedented times. Many of the world's central banks printing effectively unlimited amounts of currency. But what about life for the junior miners, those looking for the next big discoveries that will keep the world supplied with metals and materials for years, maybe even decades to come? How has the coronavirus pandemic affected them? And have they been able to keep the drill rigs turning? Joining me now, all the way from Truro in Cornwall, is Phil Newall, the Managing Director of Wardell Armstrong International, one of the world's premier metallurgical consultants. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So can you tell us, just from your perspective first, from Wardell's perspective, have you been able to keep operating throughout this crisis, or have you seen major effects as a result of the lockdown?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. It's been very difficult times, I think, for everybody. We, right at the outset of this pandemic, one of the things I did predict that would be that our international mining arm, which is the arm I represent, would be badly impacted by this, simply by the fact that none of us can get on a plane and go anywhere to look at individual properties. But the one area of our firm which we've been very successful with whilst this has all been going on is our process test work facilities, because we had a number of clients who had large programs of work ongoing at the time of the pandemic, and since then, of course, we've actually inherited quite a lot of test work from samples which were heading to other labs elsewhere in the world, which of course have been put under lockdown. So we've actually had a bit of a win on that side of things. But our everyday consulting we provide to clients all over the world has been pretty severely impacted. But a lot of it is really down to clients, I think, just to a man, nervous at this time about how much money they should be spending, whether they sit on it, whether they delay projects. The common theme we see is clients will say, well, let's talk again in July or September or whenever that port of time is. But there are a number of things clients can do during this time to help get everybody through this problem.
So difficult to meet clients face to face, difficult, obviously impossible at the moment to go on site visits, but metallurgical test work still going along. Well, I won't say nothing's happened, but you're still able to do that processing that test work.
Yeah, we've had to get pretty creative, of course, in terms of social distancing. We used to have one sort of standard 8-hour shift during the day. We've now split that into 2 8-hour shifts so we've got the same number of people working overall during a day, but obviously half the numbers at any one time. And that's actually been very successful. And I suspect what we'll do is we will actually carry this on once this pandemic is over, because you actually become more efficient by doing that. So I feel like that's a plus that's come out of it for us.
What about anecdotally, if you look at the industry, obviously you're in receipt of core samples from mines all over the world, and they say, we'd like you to assay this for whatever metal or mineral it is. What can you say from your experience of receipts is happening in terms of exploration activity?
I think like everybody in the industry, we're seeing a lot of reports of juniors, particularly exploration drill rigs, standing down during the pandemic period, which is very, very sad. But of course, they will come back in time. We're seeing most of our existing test work samples coming through from clients we were already working with, or clients who are at a more mature stage of operation, through to PFS or DFS and beyond. And particularly also some mines which are in production themselves but are looking to open up brownfield sites. So if you like the front end of all of this, the exploration side, no, that has been severely impacted by this crisis. And out of all the parts of the sector, I would say that's the worst hit of all.
Can you say anything about geographical patterns? I mean, anecdotally, I observe that Australia, for example, seems to be continuing to function reasonably.
It's you're right. Australia, I just had a Zoom call with some of my family this morning, and Australia certainly is ahead of the curve in terms of releasing lockdown. Things are moving forward more there. I think Africa is certainly, a lot of those countries in terms of their front-end exploration has slowed down significantly. You just have to read the daily news wires to see lots of companies have got limitations of what they can and can't do. But certainly in Europe, even though Europe has been badly hit, some of our main clients are still managing to function pretty well. So I don't think it's that easy to make some broad brush opinions of what's happening across the world. I think each company and each country is taking things at their own speed. But I think mining companies are pretty resilient, and they are finding ways to make make the wheels keep turning. When I say mining companies, I'm including everybody, including the exploration as well. And interesting times, but I think it is bringing out some really innovative ideas from clients, to what they can and can't do.
So if I'm a junior mining company, and let's say I'm operating in West Africa, I've got drill rigs turning, I'm producing core samples, I want you to do the metallurgical test work. How easy is it for me to get my core sample from the middle of Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, to you in Cornwall?
Well, there lies the, there is a bit of a problem, of course. What we were finding early on, we're doing a lot of work in Saudi Arabia at the moment, and what happened, we had a number of samples scheduled to be on a particular flight, and it kept getting bumped because, of course, they were putting on, quite rightly so, medical supplies were taking precedence. So it's all very well to get your cargo slot booked, but it's another thing whether it actually happens in time. So generally speaking, it isn't a problem. Cargo, as we all know, cargo flights are still flying all around the world. And that will continue. And I think certainly the aviation industry, although it's going through a terrible time at the moment, things again should start to improve for that. So one should start to see more flights, which hopefully inevitably will end up some of us allowed to go on a plane and go and visit some of these mines and projects we hopefully give sensible advice about.
We very definitely look forward to that moment, of course. What can companies be doing in the meantime?
Yeah, I certainly if you're at the exploration end of things, with let's say your drill rigs have stopped, and arguably most of your staff have probably been, let's use that word, furloughed, sent home to wherever that might be. I mean, certainly as geos around the world, one of the first things you can be doing is sorting out all your data. Inevitably, databases through exploration companies, just through pressures of works, often get pulled together in a little bit of a higgledy-piggledy sort of way. This is just an ideal opportunity to really get a grip on that. Maybe get all your data into GIS, which is something that some companies, a lot of companies do, but some might need an opportunity like this to do that. Do much more, if you like, background research into the provenance of your particular project. Look at the local metallurgy, the general geology of the area. Just get more familiar with how things operate in your district. Look at how your peers are doing in adjacent properties, etc. So this is really a period where clients should be taking stock of what they've got. Another thing that we'd certainly advise, and we have advised some of our clients, is certainly the old environmental and social baseline work, which, as we all know, often holds up projects because it takes, there is a very finite timeline for how long that process takes. And this is something that a number of clients have started and are running through this pandemic period whilst other operations have stopped, giving them a bit of leeway at the front end of a project when they can actually deliver on time, hopefully.
Would this increase their costs, or would this just reschedule when they're experiencing them?
More rescheduling, because a lot of the ENS baseline work tends to be done by local contractors anyway. Certainly we operate that way. We have a number of, if you like, international experts, but we wouldn't dream of putting them in place in country X, because obviously we're too expensive. We tend to do an auditing and management approach to ENS baseline work, because a lot of the local contractors around the world are perfectly able to do that work. And of course, they're best placed to do it anyway. They know the local ropes, so to speak.
Another function I think that you perform is that, and it's very relevant to junior mining companies, is that when they want to raise finance, you will often talk to investors or interface with investors and do due diligence on that company. Is that something you're able to do at the moment? What are the sort of restrictions there? Because, of course, it's vitally important, or it could be vitally important depending on the timing of their operations. Junior mining companies might actually be looking to refinance at this moment.
Yeah, it's something I've been talking quite a lot during this last few weeks with PE groups and some of the banks about the whole concept of a let's call it a full due diligence, which of course would involve some form of site visit, and that's usually done under compliance of something like JORC code or whatever that might be. It is a prerequisite. Now, in these difficult times we are operating under, we haven't tested this yet, but for instance, for a mineral resource estimate, normally, of course, you would have to visit the site to check on what the core, how the samples were collected, all those different things that go into giving you comfort as a consultant that those data have been collected properly and the end result is something that the markets can rely on. Now, of course, that step now, in many cases, can't actually be done. But of course, the big question then comes, of course, in any due diligence, let's say it's for this time for a mining company, so have a number of assets. Usually a data room is opened and it should be transparent. And in this day and age, one hopes these things are transparent. So as a group of engineers, we are able to go through the data, put our thoughts together and come up with a conclusion. I will say, in the last few years, it's rare that once you've done your desktop due diligence, that when you do your site visit, your overall, impressions of an operation change much. They do change in some areas. You obviously get a first-hand opinion of how things operate, maybe talking to staff. They might reveal something that management might not tell you, for instance. But the broad opinion of what projects look like often remains pretty similar. So what I've been suggesting to other groups is, I think what this might lead to, certainly in the short term where visits are still difficult, is much more of a staggered approach to finance, in that you deliver your due diligence report, which is without a site visit, and then any finance you could predicate that on a final site visit, which you like would confirm findings. And that sort of approach, I think, is probably being adopted as is.
Is it possible to do any of that sort of work remotely? Is it possible to film the site?
We have got videos from sites run. The local geologist has run around the core. He's run around the sample preparation area, the security of samples, this kind of thing. So we have been able to see what's going on in a number of operations. And arguably, I would say that if you're dealing with a relatively trustworthy client, that you could argue that could be sufficient. But of course, under the guidelines, it's still pretty essential to do a site visit. So, but these are extraordinary times we deal in. As of course, under 43-101, it's very much a if not, why not approach. If you don't do something, you have to say why you haven't done it. And I would suggest that a COVID-19 reason is a pretty good reason why you can't visit a site. And you'd hopefully get a little bit of slack from the regulators if you announce something but hadn't quite been, the final box ticked.
Have you seen any evidence that the regulators might give you a bit of slack?
No, it's like everybody's waiting for the litmus test of whether this works. But I mean, I've been doing this job for nearly 40 years now, and I can't see why that wouldn't be acceptable. We are in extraordinary times. And of course, don't forget, the proof will be in the pudding at some point in the future when some independent group or whatever can have a look at your assets. So, but this whole concept of how much financing could be given on the back of a due diligence without a site visit, well, that's open to that's a huge can of worms. Who knows? Depends how hungry you are after the asset. Depends whether it's gold. Depends what commodity it is. Some are up, some are down. Tough times.
Phil, I can't believe you've been in the industry 40 years. It
right.
Seems extraordinary. You don't look a day over it yourself.
Yeah, it's a good living in Cornwall. That's what it is.
Good. One final question, if I may. I'm going to make a huge generalization here, but most of the world has been in lockdown for about a month and a half. Yep. As far as the mining industry is concerned, or even the junior mining industry, or particularly the junior mining industry, how long do you think they can keep going before the current restrictions start posing a real problem to their ability to continue doing business?
Yeah. I mean, it's twofold. Certainly, again, we're quite a good, I'll use that word again, litmus test of where the industry is at in terms of its market performance. But now, of course, it's where it's at in terms of its pandemic performance. And we, literally in the last week, we've started to see a bit more interest from some of the, particularly the junior clients we were talking to before all this happened, that they are now looking to begin to get things going again. So I think that's very positive. Unfortunately, as we all know, this virus is at different places, different stages around the world. We hear tales of Moscow's up to sort of, 10,000 cases a day or something. So you could argue someone like Russia might be at the earlier stage of this. But equally, I talked to our manager in Moscow, which I did this morning. We are still doing a couple of projects in Russia as I speak, and we're looking to negotiate a third one right now. So Kazakhstan the same. They're over it. We can't visit yet, but I think that's going to happen very soon, that those doors will be open. And I think, Charlie, this is just going to be something that will unravel as the world begins to come out of this. And again, certainly looking at the British press, you've probably noticed literally in the last couple of days, there's a lot more talk now about when the lockdown is lifted. And a lot of the Europe now in particular is beginning to be at this same point. And I think everybody's is as optimistic as they can be. But of course, each project has its own local circumstances, which may or not preclude startup.
Phil, we wish you the very best of luck. We wish the industry the very best of luck as well. That was Phil Newall, ladies and gentlemen, from Truro in Cornwall, the Managing Director of Wardell Armstrong International. I'm afraid that's all we got time for, but join me, Charlie Gibson, on Core Finance for more news and investment ideas in the very near future. I know that wasn't strictly an investment idea, but hopefully you can gather a bit of anecdotal information and some idea of how the industry is faring under the current restrictions and constraints. As I say, that's all we've got time for, but join us very soon for more investment ideas. This is me, Charlie Gibson, signing off until we're back together. You have a very capital day.